的再见！看尽的再见！
Tired of playing the same heroes back to back? Feeling like a meta slave? Well, it's time to pick up Mobile Legends' most problematic assassin. Released back in December 4 of 2018, Hanzo has never had any mainstream levels of success. Although he did have popularity back in the 313 meta because of the recent revamp he had at the time, he was still an off-meta pick at best. Yeah, remember 313? Honestly, at that era of the fucking game because every match was literally the same and it's formulaic as fuck. In the present, he is mostly a pick you play for fun at epics and legend ranks, as most players there are inexperienced with the Hanzo matchup. The higher ranks you go, however, the harder it is to play Hanzo, even at an optimal level. It's not that he is a weak hero, but yeah, he really is a weak hero in terms of mechanics. The real reason why it's so hard to play him today is because of the meta. The meta favoring more burst damage heroes that have high sustain or just have an overloaded mobility kit that can easily dodge and catch his fragile mortal body. Now, before we get into the guide, know that I didn't discover the techniques and tricks in this video. These are mostly community found and through word of mouth. I do not claim these are my ideas originally. Now, without further ado, this is the definitive Hanzo guide of 2023 with matchup knowledge and tips and tricks all in one.
No one's spared.
Hanzo is an assassin that specializes in poking, a quite rare combination in this game where assassins tend to dive in headfirst into clashes or wait it out to clean up. You either die first or die a little later. He can freely enter enemy engagements and bail out at a moment's notice for some risk-free cheap kills. Passive. He has no fucking passive. Now, jokes aside, there is a sort of passive, which is the blood bar, and this is your main way of using his ult. Enemies and allies that die around you grant blood. Heroes grant more blood than creeps and minions. So technically you don't have energy. It's more of a time limit for your ult that we'll explain later, but you already know what he does anyway. Skill 1. This is one of Hanzo's main gimmicks. It's the key to his incredible farming speed and rotation. And perhaps the only jungler that can easily get 2 buffs without compromising his rotation. Unlocked after 5 basic attacks, aim using the smart targeting system to avoid embarrassing yourself in game. You also have a 6.5 second window of using this skill, unless you have to start all over again with the 5 basic attacks. Skill 2. This is another way of getting more free blood stacks. When you're rotating around, always use this skill on minions, jungle creeps, preferably the blue buff because there are 2 in the camp, and enemy heroes you happen to come by. Skill 3. This is what makes Hanzo, Hanzo. The very essence of his game plan. Using this ult will immediately grant you demon blood and spit your soul out, granting you attack speed, movement speed, unobstructed movement, and a new set of abilities. This state runs for as long as the length of your blood meter, maxing out at roughly 10 seconds. If the ghost Hanekage dies during the state, you return to Hanzo, stun for 3 seconds, revealed to the enemies in the map, magic and physical defense reduced to 0, and get a severe 55% slow afterwards. Munton, what the fuck? Why punish him that much for doing what he's supposed to do? The stun and the exposure to the enemies was harsh enough, but magic and physical defense reduced to 0 and a slow? Come on, Munton, please fix this. And it's not that big of a deal, actually. Okay, on to the new set of skills you unlock by using the ult. Skill 1. Skill 1 in Ghost form becomes a short-range burst skill, requiring 5 basic attacks and having a 6.5 second window of use. This will be your main way of shocking the enemy with high damage and a CC knockup. Although it's very short, the airborne can interrupt some channeling skills. And it also has invincibility frames, giving you free range to outplay your opponents. The important part of this skill is that the majority of the damage is based on the max HP of the enemy's hit. 15% at level 1 and 25% at max. This is why you do not need a lot of physical attack items with him, as the scaling on this thing is really bad. So max this thing first. Skill 2 becomes Ninjutsu Devastator, one of your key offensive skills. Aim this skill to become immune and quickly deal area basic attack damage up to 8 times if enemies do continue to get hit. The key word to this is basic attack, as this skill will trigger basic attack effects as if you're hitting them normally. This is another reason why you don't need high physical attack stats for Hanzo. The majority of his damage is dependent on him building Trinity build, but unfortunately, the damage of DHS is cut to half during this state. Moonton, please fix! Hitting enemies during this state also triggers stacks for skill 1. Skill 3 then becomes your disengage skill. It gives you the option to let Hanekage return to Hanzo or let Hanzo come to Hanekage, letting you decide on whether it is convenient to retreat or save up some time to do objectives and jungle creep stealing. Pro tip: be careful about engaging enemies when you are low on blood, because when you're CC'd, you cannot return to Hanzo, which is just plain bit unfair, but okay, Moonton.
Rest in peace.
For off-meta heroes like Hanzo, the best item build is so subjective. It can vary from person to person and in accordance to the enemy composition. Some people even opted for Tank Hanzo, and yes, it does work, but it's just boring as fuck. We seriously need to stop with this assassin with tank build. It's honestly fucking annoying. So far, the best build in my opinion for Hanzo is this build: Magic Shoes, Hunter Strike, Corrosion Scythe, Golden Staff, Demon Hunter Sword, and a free slot for any adjustable items that you want. For the build path, you buy Magic Shoes at the start of the game as soon as possible for his skill 1 and ult cooldowns, which we will discuss later. After that, focus on getting Fury Hammer for the penetration and extra damage. Now this is the part where you decide on whether to finish it up with Hunter Strike or to get Crossbow and then Hunter Strike. Once you finish with the Hunter Strike, get Corrosion Scythe and follow up with the Trinity build. There are also optional decisions you can do, such as deciding whether or not you should get Demon Hunter Sword or Golden Staff after Corrosion Scythe. If you're up against squishies, I suggest Golden Staff as you can stack skill 1 faster and get faster farming speed. This is because Golden Staff enables you to unlock skill 1 with only 3 basic attacks. Corrosion Scythe bonus damage increases too, making it easier to farm and deal damage during mid-game without much items. Let's compare that to, say, building Demon Hunter Sword right after Corrosion Scythe. You're only getting 60 bonus damage if you attack creeps. This will be a compromise to your farming potential in the mid-game, but if you really needed damage, especially against the sustain or fighter levels of HP, then go for DHS. Finish it up with whatever is left with the Trinity build, and then you get a free slot for building whatever you want. Personally, I would go for Malefic Roar because 3-digit armors are common in high-ranked matches. But you could also go with some defensive utility. But I do not recommend any form of high armor or magic defense because it will just be wasted on his ult. Because during his ult, his defensive stats are halved when Hanekage is out. But this gets better with every level up of this skill, starting at 50% to 42.5 and then 35%. Still, wasted stats on a squishy hero by default. What I would recommend would be HP stats, since it is not reduced during the ult form. So if you really had to have defense for whatever reason, just build Guardian Helmet for that bulk amount of HP, or just have Brute Force Breastplate for that cool stats of 10% cooldown reduction, movement speed, and some HP. The emblems I recommend for Hanzo are the Assassin emblem, as it gives you 16 penetration at the very start of the game. You can't get any more than that in this game. And the next I recommend is the Support emblem. And you'd be thinking, what? Support emblem? Whoa, easy Tiger, relax! As you can see, this provides Hanzo with one of the most usable and consistent stats in the game. 10% cooldown reduction and 6% movement speed as base stats. Movement speed is self-explanatory, but CD reduction? Let me explain. If we get 10% for free and using the standard build while having the blue buff, we'll easily cap the cooldown reduction, allowing us to have almost 9 seconds of ult cooldown and a 15-second skill 1 for eating. This is essential for Hanzo players because the ultimate gives free blood, and it's exceptionally higher as you increase its level. In the early and mid game, supplement your farming with the ult, so that when the time is needed, you'll be right in the fight safely and reliably as you have a full blood bar. And by late game, the ult gives 45 blood, amounting to almost half a meter. Having that every 9 to 10 seconds will allow you to play at a safer distance and provide info without risk. As a Hanzo, you will need to abuse his strengths as a poking assassin because he has an awful lot of weaknesses, which we will tackle later in the video. These are the talents I recommend you use. Although, feel free to utilize talents such as Seasoned Hunter, Lethal Ignition, Quantum Charge, and Pull Yourself Together. What I do not recommend, however, is Killing Spree, despite it sounding like a good talent for an assassin like Hanzo. You may argue that the 8% of max HP heal is good, but then you realize that the main body does not benefit at all. Second, the movement speed seems to be good, but then again, Hanzo's ult has a time limit and it's way too situational. Most of the time, Hanekage won't even survive for that long after a kill. But hey, to each their own, I guess. In my opinion, there are only two ways to play Hanzo in this current meta. You either jungle or you play roam. Jungle is better in solo queue situations in comparison to roam, but all in all, each provides their own set of pros and cons. Let's begin with the designated role, which is the jungle role. If you start in the red buff, eat the red buff and immediately run for the blue buff to retrieve the small buff, then proceed to prepare your skill 1 for the Lito, since it always spawns closest to the blue buff. Successful or not, immediately start farming towards the crab, stealing whatever resources the enemies have along the way, such as the enemy's beetles or the enemy's lizard. If you start in the blue buff, immediately use retribution on the small buff and eat the big buff, then run towards the red buff and hack away at the small camp here. When the litho spawns, you already have your skill 1 ready to eat the red buff, or you could use that skill 1 to eat the Little Wanderer, whichever is more convenient. Either way, use up your retry on whatever is you used on the first farm. The race to level 4 is your goal. This strategy gets easier the more synchronized your team is, because most of the time, the enemy has already invaded your space and delay your pace, so having a reliable teammate to zone the enemies is a must. If you messed up the rotation at the start, don't worry because Hanzo can manage these situations very well. Do not engage if you fuck up your rotation. Just continue to be the bottom feeder that you are and gobble up all the jungle creeps you can find. Once the first turtle is up, you must have a full meter by then. Because it's time to take the first turtle. Signal your team and position the turtle to your side and get it done ASAP. If the enemy arrives, be sure to time your skill 1 with your retribution to get an easy last hit. But if your ghost is low on HP, but you still have retribution ready, use it on the turtle to become immune. This will give you enough time to think about the timing, and if you fuck up, just go back and try again on the next turtle spawn. Farm 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 is the name of the game. In terms of ganking, always gank the lane with an opponent you can easily kill. The secret is to always play unfair, as this game is all about playing as unfair as possible to win against your opponent. But yeah, why'd you even pick Hanzo in the first place? Finally, just continue to do what you do with other junglers after that stage of the game. Now into a more exciting playstyle, which is Roam Hanzo. With Roam Hanzo, you are basically playing the role of a damage roam with the ability to steal enemy resources. Think of it like playing an Natalia that can steal your lunch money. In this role, pick Dire Hit or Conceal. If you play with Sprint, pick Dire Hit. If you don't play with Sprint, pick Conceal. But hey, I won't judge you for picking whatever. It doesn't really matter that much. Our first strategy with this is to assess which buff the enemy will likely take and if you would steal it or not. Ask yourself, where could they be? Can I survive against the enemy support? Which buff should I steal? Check the enemy lineup. If it's a mana or energy dependent jungler, then it's best to steal the blue buff, but it's gonna be a 1 versus 3 in most cases. So analyze if you can actually land the 5 stacks, sprint in, and eat and get out. But don't worry about dying. You are a roamer, and the digestion actually loads up even after death, so when you respawn, you will still have the buff with you. If you analyze that the situation does not allow you to steal the blue buff, then it's a more realistic situation to steal the red buff or whatever buff the enemy is likely to get second. I prefer the second option as it prevents potential feeding and is the safer option. Regardless of you succeeding on the steal at the start, the next thing you should be doing is delaying the enemy's level 4 by eating the jungle creeps leading up to the turtle. Eat the green camps and the crab ASAP while avoiding pesky little shits trying to kill you. After the early game, just do what a damage roam should do, helping their teammates in clashes, ganks, and providing vision. With Hanzo Roam, you can freely enter enemy territory without risk, so abuse that. You don't even need to change your build that much with Hanzo Roam. Just stick with the recommended build and opt for an anti-heal item when it is needed. Now time for some Hanzo tech.